Chapter 1: The Explorers Club and the Treasure Hunt. The Performing Arts Center at Joplin High School hummed with restless energy. Rows of students poured into the modern auditorium, their sneakers scuffing against the polished floor as they scrambled for seats. The tiered seating filled quickly, the eager and the indifferent alike drawn by the promise of the Murphysburg Treasure Hunt's big reveal. The air was thick with whispers and speculation. Some students leaned forward, elbows on their knees, whispering theories about past winners and potential clues. Others sat back, arms crossed, feigning disinterest, though their tapping fingers on chair arms betrayed their excitement. A few had already pulled out their phones, their screens glowing as they posted their predictions to social media. Along the walls of the auditorium, large banners hung in proud display, a timeline of the event's storied past. One showed black and white photographs of early Joplin, streets bustling with miners, gamblers, and outlaws. Another displayed yellowed newspaper clippings detailing strange discoveries from previous hunts. A rusted safe unearthed behind an old saloon, cryptic symbols carved into an abandoned tunnel, a locked iron box that no one had been able to open. Most impressive was the massive projector screen dominating the stage, glowing softly with the image of an ancient map of Joplin. The edges were curled and ink-faded, its markings both familiar and foreign. Some areas looked identical to modern maps, but others, sections of town that should have been labeled, were blank. The murmurs grew louder. This year's hunt felt different already. Near the front, Alex Carter sat with his arms crossed, his hazel eyes locked on the stage. His foot tapped anxiously against the floor. This year had to be different. The last time he competed, his team had barely placed. They had split up, worked in different groups, made mistakes. But this year, he was determined to go all in, to build the right team and actually win. Beside him, Jamie Patel flipped open a leather-bound notebook, his precise handwriting already filling the margins. He adjusted his glasses and muttered, "This isn't just a scavenger hunt. It's a real opportunity. If we take this seriously, we might actually uncover something bigger." Alex smirked but didn't take his eyes off the stage. Yeah, just don't overthink it, man. We need to win, not write a history thesis." Before Jamie could reply, the overhead lights dimmed, sending a hush through the crowd. On stage, the microphone crackled to life. Stepping up to the podium, Principal Randy Oliver adjusted his tie, offering a polished but routine smile. Mr. Oliver was a tall man with a neatly pressed suit, the type of administrator who rarely showed excitement, but even he couldn't hide the slight enthusiasm in his voice as he looked over the audience. "Good morning, students," he began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "I know that most of you aren't here just to hear me talk, so I'll keep this brief." A ripple of chuckles swept through the crowd. He gestured toward the banners along the walls. The Murphysburg Treasure Hunt has been a Joplin tradition for years. What started as a local history project has become something much more, something that challenges your minds, your teamwork, and your ability to think like true explorers. Jamie nudged Alex, whispering, "Sounds a little more dramatic than last year?" Alex just nodded. Mr. Oliver continued, "Of course, none of this would be possible without the leadership of someone who has helped curate the hunt's challenges and unearth new locations for you all to explore. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the head of this year's Murphysburg Treasure Hunt, Mrs. Paula Callahan." The audience applauded, and the spotlight shifted as a woman stepped forward. Paula Callahan moved with quiet confidence, the kind of person who commanded a room without raising her voice. She was elegantly dressed in a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white blouse. Her auburn hair was swept into a perfect chignon, and her sharp brown eyes scanned the crowd before she spoke. "Good morning," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. The audience settled instantly. For over a century, Joplin has been a city of explorers. From the miners who carved tunnels beneath our streets to the dreamers and builders who shaped the city above them, exploration is in our blood. The projector screen flickered, zooming in on the ancient map of Joplin. Paula turned slightly, gesturing toward it with an air of reverence, as if revealing something long hidden. This year's hunt is unlike any other, she continued. We've uncovered new locations, ones untouched for decades, places that even past winners have never explored. There are clues hidden in Joplin's history that many have overlooked. And for those who are bold enough to chase them, she paused, her fingers tightening slightly on the podium. A beat of silence. Then, a prize of at least $100,000 awaits. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Then, whispers. An eruption of conversation. Students sat up straighter, some scrambling for their phones, others murmuring theories to their friends. In the front row, Jamie stiffened, his grip on his notebook tightening. 100 grand? He whispered. That's way more than last year. Even Alex felt his pulse quicken. But in that split second, he caught something else, a flicker in Paula's expression. Just for a moment, a hesitation. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual composed confidence. But Alex saw it. Why would she hesitate before announcing the prize? Paula took a slow, steady breath. Joplin has its share of legends, she said. Some whisper of hidden tunnels beneath our city. Others speak of buried treasure, gold once stolen, now lost to time. Her gaze swept the crowd, lingering just long enough to pull them in. Some of these stories are nothing more than folklore, but others, well, some legends just need the right explorers to find them. The room buzzed with whispered speculation. Alex exchanged a look with Jamie. This was bigger than they thought. All around them, students were reacting in different ways, some whispering excitedly, others rushing toward the registration table. Even the students who had acted uninterested before now looked fully invested. Jamie nudged Alex, his eyes gleaming. You still think this is just about winning? Alex smirked, a thrill sparking in his chest. No, he admitted. This is about making history. The game had changed. They just didn't know how much. The crowd's murmurs persisted as Paula continued outlining the rules, her voice firm but struggling to cut through the restless energy in the auditorium. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and anticipation, a mixture of hopeful contenders and skeptical observers waiting to see what this so-called treasure hunt was really about. But Alex's attention had already strayed. A flicker of movement near the exit caught his eye, a shadow lingering just beyond the reach of the dim stage lights. A man stood there, leaning against the wall with an easy confidence, arms crossed over his chest. His presence was oddly still, his sharp gaze fixed on the stage, unreadable yet intense. Something about the way he watched, detached but deeply aware, sent a ripple of unease through Alex. He nudged Jamie. Who's that? Jamie followed his gaze, and the moment his eyes landed on the man, his expression darkened. Victor Calloway. Alex frowned. The name was familiar. The treasure hunter? Jamie nodded. Yeah, he's been in the news a few times, mostly for digging in places he wasn't supposed to. Victor stood tall, his frame lean but powerful, dressed in dark jeans that looked well worn from travel, a black utility vest layered over a fitted long-sleeve shirt. His presence carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to working outside the rules. His dark hair, combed back with precise neatness, was streaked with silver at the temples, adding an air of distinction rather than age. A faint scar traced a sharp line along his right cheekbone before disappearing into the rough shadow of his stubble. There was something about him, something coiled, waiting, The air around him felt charged, like the weight before a storm, and then his eyes flicked toward Alex. A slow, deliberate smirk curved his lips, unreadable, calculating. Then, as if making a decision, he moved. Victor stepped forward, cutting through the space between them with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention. He barely brushed Alex's shoulder as he passed, but the impact was enough to send Alex's notebook slipping from his grasp. The worn leather journal tumbled to the floor, its pages fanning open, the hastily scribbled notes and sketches suddenly exposed. Victor crouched in a single fluid motion, retrieving it with an ease that suggested familiarity with handling fragile things. He turned it over in his hands, running a thumb along the creased binding, before finally offering it back. But he didn't let go immediately. His grip lingered. "Careful," he murmured, his voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable edge. "You wouldn't want to lose your notes." Alex swallowed, hesitating for just a second before taking the notebook back. He could feel the roughness of Victor's calloused fingers before the man finally released it. Jamie had gone rigid beside him, his body tensed like a drawn bow. Victor didn't move away, he simply watched. And then, as if nothing had happened at all, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded map. But it wasn't the same map Paula had just shown on the projector. This one was older, worn at the creases. Extra markings sprawled across the parchment. Notes scrawled in the margins. Locations crossed out. Coordinates amended. A work in progress. A puzzle nearly solved. Victor wasn't here to figure out the treasure hunt. He already knew. Alex's pulse quickened, unease threading through him. What was he really looking for? Jamie swallowed hard, his gaze flicking between Victor and Paula Callahan, who had just noticed the man's approach. Her expression tightened as Victor leaned in, speaking to her in hushed, clipped tones. Paula's shoulders stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. Something was off. Alex turned to Jamie. What's he really doing here? Jamie exhaled slowly, his eyes shadowed. I don't know. But Alex wasn't convinced. The look in Jamie's eyes said otherwise. The moment the assembly ended, the once contained excitement exploded into the wide, brightly lit hallways of Joplin High. Students moved in a chaotic flow, their conversations overlapping as they poured from the Performing Arts Center into the corridors lined with rows of metal lockers. The chatter bounced off the polished tile floors, mixing with the rhythmic slams of locker doors and the occasional burst of laughter. The air smelled of old textbooks, worn paper, and faint traces of industrial floor cleaner. Sunlight streamed through the large windows at the end of the hallway, casting geometric patterns across the walls where posters advertising the Murphysburg Treasure Hunt were pinned in neat rows. Some of the posters had already been vandalized. Hastily scribbled notes questioning if Jesse James's gold was real, or snarky doodles of exaggerated treasure chests bursting with cartoonish coins. Alex walked with Jamie, Zoe, and Riley, navigating through the shifting sea of students. We need a plan, Zoe said, flipping open her journal as they walked. The worn leather cover creaked slightly, the pages filled with her compact handwriting. If the Olivia apartments were erased from Mr. Andrews's map, that means there's something someone didn't want us to find. Jamie adjusted the strap of his backpack. The city archives might have something, but Mr. Andrews might be our best shot. He has access to historical records that aren't digitized. Riley, who had been strolling behind them, let out a long sigh and shoved his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. So, let me get this straight. We're ditching normal teenage things to chase some forgotten section of a map? Zoe smirked, arching an eyebrow at him. We're uncovering history. Riley chuckled. You say history, I say ghost stories. Morgan, who had been sketching idly in the margins of her notebook, glanced up from her page. Every ghost story starts with a truth. Alex didn't respond. He was still thinking about Victor Calloway, how calm and composed he had seemed, like a man who already knew exactly what he was looking for. That map he had, its extra markings, its annotations, wasn't just a curiosity, it was a lead. As they turned a corner, Alex caught a glimpse of the main entrance. Near the doorway, standing half hidden in the shadows, was Victor. The man was in the middle of a quiet conversation with Paula Callahan. Unlike during her confident presentation on stage, her posture was tense now, her shoulders stiff, her hands clasped together tightly in front of her. She nodded to whatever Victor was saying, then glanced quickly around, as if to check who might be watching. Alex slowed his steps, pulling Jamie to a stop with him. Look. Jamie followed his gaze. Victor leaned in slightly, whispering something to Paula. Her expression didn't change much, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of concern, a hesitation before she responded. Then, almost as if she could sense them watching, Paula turned her head slightly. Alex grabbed Jamie's arm and nudged him forward. Keep walking. Jamie exhaled, his voice barely audible. This is bigger than we thought. By the time they reached Mr. Andrews's history classroom, the buzzing energy from the treasure hunt announcement had faded slightly. Inside the room, the atmosphere was different, calmer, but thick with something unspoken. The classroom had the air of a historian's personal library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were crammed with hardcovers on everything from Joplin's mining industry to early Missouri settlers. Framed newspaper clippings lined one wall, each one detailing pieces of the city's past. Some well-known, others nearly forgotten. A large wooden desk stood at the front, stacked with papers and faded documents. But the most striking feature of the room was the massive framed map of Joplin hanging at the back. The map was old, its once crisp paper had yellowed with age, the ink faded in places. Its edges curled slightly within the protective glass, giving it a fragile, time-worn appearance. It was incredibly detailed, showing streets, businesses, and underground features in painstaking accuracy. Except for one section. Morgan was the first to notice it. She paused mid-step, tilting her head as she examined the map from across the room. Hey, she murmured, stepping closer. This section near the Olivia apartments. Alex, Jamie, and Zoe turned toward her. Morgan reached up, tapping her pencil against the blank space on the map. Every other part of Joplin had street names, landmarks, and labels. But this area, nothing. Just an empty void where something should have been. Jamie frowned. That's weird. It's not even faded. It's like someone deliberately left it blank. Zoe stepped forward, running her fingers lightly along the edge of the frame. This is intentional. A heavy silence settled over them. Then, from across the room, Mr. Andrews spoke. Maps tell stories, he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. They turned to find the history teacher watching them, arms crossed. His silver-framed glasses reflected the classroom's dim light, making his expression unreadable. They show how a place was built, who lived there, and what mattered at the time, he continued. But sometimes they leave things out. Jamie hesitated. Why would someone erase part of the map? Mr. Andrews didn't answer right away. Instead, he strode toward his desk, pulling open the top drawer. His fingers brushed against something inside, a folder maybe, before he hesitated. Then, slowly, he shut the drawer and turned the key in the lock. The sound echoed through the classroom. His hand lingered on the desk for just a moment before he looked up again. Some mysteries, he said finally, were never meant to be solved. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy, as if something unseen had settled over them. Alex exchanged a glance with Jamie. They both knew what this meant. This wasn't just about a treasure hunt anymore. This was bigger. The final bell rang, its sharp chime echoing through the hallways, signaling the transition to the last period of the day. Outside the classroom, students drifted in an unhurried tide, their footsteps a rhythmic shuffle against the linoleum floors. Snatches of conversation blended into a familiar hum. Weekend plans whispered between friends, last-minute cramming for upcoming tests, the occasional burst of laughter. But inside the history room, the world felt different, more still, more focused. Alex and his friends remained seated, their unfinished discussion more pressing than whatever awaited them beyond the door. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow over the worn wooden desks and the faded map pinned at the back of the classroom. A few stray papers fluttered as someone shifted, the only sign of movement in the otherwise tense silence. "We need to do this together," Alex said, his voice quiet but resolute. He leaned forward, hands flat against the table as he met each of their gazes. "If we split up, we'll lose time. But if we work as a team, we'll have a real shot at figuring this out." Riley sighed, shifting his weight against a nearby desk, arms crossed. His usual skepticism was there, but something else lingered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we need a name." At the far end of the table, Morgan, absent-mindedly sketching in the margins of her notebook, lifted her head. Her pencil stilled, a thoughtful glint in her eyes. "The Explorers Club," she said simply. A beat of silence followed, as if the words carried more weight than they should have. Jamie considered it first, then nodded. "Simple. Strong. It works." Alex smirked, a flicker of excitement cutting through his usual seriousness. "Then it's settled." From the front of the room, a quiet chuckle broke the moment. Mr. Andrews, the history teacher, sat at his desk, arms folded as he observed them with the kind of knowing look that only a teacher who had seen too much could muster. His amusement was subtle, but his gaze lingered, just for a moment, on the locked drawer in his desk. "A good name," he mused, his voice even, almost thoughtful. Then his eyes flicked back to them, and his tone shifted, carrying something heavier beneath the words. "Just be sure you're ready for what you might find." The air in the room changed. The weight of his words settled over them, unspoken but undeniable. And with that, the Explorers Club had officially begun. The classroom door swung open as Alex and his friends stepped out into the bustling hallway, their conversation continuing in hushed but urgent voices. The rest of the school was moving at its usual Friday afternoon pace, students lingering by their lockers, swapping weekend plans, a few seniors already making their way toward the parking lot. The air held that restless energy of a school week coming to an end, but for the Explorers Club, their day was just beginning. Sunlight streamed through the wide hallway windows, creating long shadows that stretched across the floor. The smell of freshly cleaned tile mixed with the lingering scent of cafeteria food and old textbooks. Posters advertising the Murphysburg Treasure Hunt fluttered slightly in the air from the movement of passing students. Zoe clutched her journal, flipping through pages covered in her precise handwritten notes. "If we want to get ahead of this, we need to get our hands on those city records. We don't even know what used to be at the Olivia Apartments before it was built." Jamie nodded. "The Joplin Public Library's archives might have something, but Mr. Andrews has a better collection of local history books than most places." He adjusted his glasses, his mind already working through their next steps. Morgan, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. "If we can find old photographs of that area, we might get a visual clue. Some buildings change, but their foundations don't." Alex walked a little ahead of them, his thoughts racing. The Olivia Apartments were the key, that much was clear. But what gnawed at him more than anything was Victor Calloway's presence. He wasn't just a competitor, he had a head start. And worse, He wasn't alone. We should meet up somewhere after school, Alex said, finally breaking his silence. We need to lay everything out, figure out what we know versus what we think we know. Joplin Avenue Coffee Company, Jamie suggested. Good Wi-Fi, plenty of tables. Alex nodded. Yeah, let's do it. The group exchanged glances, the weight of what they were stepping into finally settling in. This wasn't just a competition anymore. They were digging into something much bigger than a scavenger hunt. As they made their way toward the school's main entrance, the late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. The scent of floor wax and the distant echo of lockers slamming shut filled the air, mingling with the chatter of students eager to leave for the day. Then Alex saw him. A familiar figure stood near the double doors, partially obscured by the steady stream of students filtering past. Victor Calloway. The treasure hunter leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest in a posture of effortless confidence. He was still, unnervingly so, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but inevitably drew it anyway. There was something about the way he stood, calm, watchful, utterly out of place in a high school hallway, yet appearing as though he belonged there more than any of them. Alex slowed his pace just enough for the others to notice. Victor wasn't looking at just anyone. He was watching them. Jamie stiffened beside Alex, his steps faltering for the briefest moment. Okay, that's unsettling. Zoe's fingers curled around the strap of her bag, her usual easygoing demeanor sharpening into something more alert. Morgan and Riley exchanged a glance, silently confirming that, yes, they all saw it. Victor smirked slightly, just at the corner of his mouth, a flicker of amusement laced with something else, something knowing. He didn't move to approach, didn't attempt to start a conversation. He simply waited, exuding the kind of patience that suggested he already knew how this was going to play out. And then, deliberately, he reached into his pocket, a folded map. Not the one Paula had shown on the projector that morning. This one was different, aged, creased at the folds, well used. The kind of map that told a story before it was even opened. Even from a few feet away, Alex could see the markings. Notes, crossed out locations, annotations made in the careful scrawl of someone piecing together a puzzle only they could see. Alex felt his pulse quicken as Victor slowly unfolded the map just enough for him to glimpse something new. A hand-drawn circle. It enclosed an unlabeled section of Joplin, just on the edge of downtown, near the Olivia apartments. Alex's breath caught. That wasn't just coincidence. Victor had a lead, and he knew they were watching. Then, just as smoothly, Victor refolded the map, tucking it back into his pocket with an ease that made it clear. He was choosing what to reveal, what to keep hidden. Without a word, he turned on his heel and strode through the doors, stepping into the golden afternoon light, disappearing. Alex exhaled, forcing himself to shake off the weight of the moment. His mind whirled, fitting pieces together. He's ahead of us. Jamie adjusted the strap of his backpack, his expression tightening with determination. Then we need to catch up. Zoe's gaze lingered on the door, her eyes narrowed. And fast. Around them, the hallway had emptied, the last few students vanishing into the parking lot or scattering to their after-school activities. The usual hum of daily life had faded, leaving only the quiet beat of something new, something dangerous. The Explorers Club had their first rival, and their first real lead. They had no idea what they were about to uncover, but there was no turning back now. The moment they stepped outside, the crisp afternoon air hit them, a stark contrast to the temperature-controlled, slightly stale atmosphere of the school. It carried with it the scent of warm asphalt, faint traces of exhaust from the idling buses, and the subtle sweetness of blooming dogwoods from the trees lining the campus. The golden light of the setting sun stretched their shadows long across the pavement, bathing the world in a soft amber glow. The campus was beginning to clear out. Clusters of students lingered in the parking lot, leaning against cars, laughing over inside jokes, making half-hearted plans for the weekend. Some climbed onto the school buses idling at the curb, their exhaust curling into the air in thin, hazy streams. The steady hum of engines, the occasional blast of a car stereo, and the rhythmic chatter of conversations blended into a familiar, constant backdrop. Alex adjusted the strap of his backpack, rolling his shoulders under the weight of the day. Everything they had learned pressed down on him, not as a burden, but as momentum. Jamie walked beside him, already flipping through his notebook, his fingers skimming over hastily scribbled notes and rough sketches, his brow furrowed in concentration. If Victor has his own map and it's marked differently from ours, it means he has information we don't. Zoe nodded, her fingers drumming idly against the edge of her journal. And if the Olivia apartments were deliberately removed from that old map, then that's where we start. Morgan pulled her sketchbook from under her arm and flipped it open. Between sketches of street signs and architectural details, the edges of her pages were filled with what looked like maps. Doodles at first, but now, under closer inspection, eerily close to the city's layout. She tapped the eraser of her pencil against the paper, deep in thought. We don't just need to find out what's missing. We need to find out why someone tried to erase it. Riley exhaled dramatically, leaning back slightly as if the sheer weight of their impending investigation was already too much. And that's how I ended up spending my Friday night chasing a conspiracy theory. Zoe smirked, tilting her head at him. You love it. Riley gave a half shrug, a lopsided grin creeping onto his face. No comment. The group moved across the parking lot toward the far corner, where Alex's car, a slightly battered but still dependable Honda, was parked next to Jamie's older model sedan. The scent of sun-warmed metal and cooling engines filled the air as the last stragglers of the school day filtered out around them. So we're set? Alex asked, glancing at each of them in turn. Joplin Avenue Coffee Company, after dinner. Jamie nodded, already forming a plan in his head. We'll pull whatever city records we can, start mapping things out properly. Zoe tapped her journal against her palm, her gaze sharp, and figure out how far ahead Victor really is. For a moment, they stood there at the edge of the lot, caught between two worlds, the familiar, predictable rhythm of high school behind them, and the unknown mystery of the city ahead. The space between those two places felt like a thin line, one they had just crossed without realizing it. Morgan tilted her head back, staring up at the sky. The light had started to fade into deeper blues, the first hints of evening creeping in. Her pencil twirled absent-mindedly between her fingers. This is how real stories start, isn't it? Alex smirked, the thrill of the unknown sparking in his chest. Yeah, and if we're lucky, we get to be the ones who tell it. The explorers